Welcome to the Real Estate 401k Show. I'm your host, Mike Weinstein, alongside Ryan Gerdes. We are your resident real estate wealth managers. What's a real estate wealth manager, you might be asking? Really, at the end of the day, if you want to make a shit ton of money in real estate,
we're the guys you talk to.
we're the guys that you talk to. Do you like money? I will say this: if you don't like money and you're not a big fan of wealth and you don't care about how you're going to retire, we are not. We're not your boys.
Yeah. Switch podcasts. Go back over to that. Hell, I don't even know.
I don't even know what to say.
I don't know the other things that are out there that would that would go against what we're talking about. But at any rate, let's move forward.
Let's move forward. And if you are interested in making a shit ton of money in real estate and building wealth, why don't you go ahead and get prepared to text the word wealth to 623-AZ-RECON. That's wealth to 623-AZ-RECON. I understand, when it comes to purchasing a home and especially in investing in anything, a lot of people look to Dave Ramsey. And there are some great things that I think he teaches. There are some things that I don't subscribe to, but have led to some incredible conversations with my kids about investing in real estate and leveraging.
I think that he just teaches financial savviness, right? It doesn't matter really what it is. It's being able to really get your finances in the chokehold and knowing how money works, because you've heard us talk about this before. We have done a terrible job as a society, as an education system, preparing our kids for adulthood, being independent and what all that looks like. And so I applaud Ramsey, because for the longest time when I listened to him, I was just like, dude, all that you're doing is teaching people how to prepare for retirement after you're 65. Not for now or for the younger generation or anything like that. And it seems like in the past 2 to 3 years, he's been changing his narrative a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
And saying, hey, look, you don't need to be able to buy a home cash in order to buy a home. You don't need to be prepared to buy a car with cash. You just need to know how to prepare for those payments. And so we're talking about a article that was submitted, about a week ago or something?
Yeah, something like that. And the title of the article is Dave Ramsey Warns Home Buyers on Mortgage Instant and Interest Rate Blunt Truth. Now, you may read that headline and think, okay, he's saying don't dabble in real estate. And really, as we get into it, it's not at all what he's saying.
No.
But back to, I think with, and like I said, this is not a knock on Dave Ramsey. I'm not. He's definitely a brilliant man.
Smart dude.
And a lot smarter than I am. But if I take a look at the wealth that I've created and accumulated over the years, and if I was a disciple of Dave Ramsey to the letter of the law, I would not have as much real estate, and frankly, I don't think I would have been able to accumulate as much wealth and be on the trajectory towards retirement like I am today.
And I think what he's finally starting to incorporate is how risk adverse should you be, right? When you're 65 years old and you're putting it all on, 5 on the roulette table, then probably not a wise idea.
Did you hear about that guy last week that did that?
No.
He took his entire life savings, sold everything, 90+ thousand, or maybe in the low $100,000, and he did this whole social media thing and had all his followers tell him what to do. And at the end of the day, he bet all of it on red. And he won.
And he hit it.
I'm like,
yeah.
That's so damn risky, though, dude.
I applaud him, but I wouldn't do it.
I would agree with Dave Ramsey if he said, don't do that.
Yeah. I wouldn't suggest it. I'm not going to do it. But, it takes some balls. And
it does, dude.
And I think that it kind of goes towards what the overall theme is of of the thing that I'm applauding Ramsey for, is he's starting to say, like, hey, look, if you are fresh out of college, if you're a first-time home buyer, or you're just moved out of the house, getting on your feet, there's some risks that you have to take in order to breach that next threshold, right? And then from there you can tighten up a little bit. You can start saying, you know what, I'm gonna hold back a little bit. You know, I'm not gonna go for broke on that one investment deal, or I'm gonna make sure I have more reserves for that one, because we're usually not flush when we first come out of college or entering the workforce. It's you have to jump out there, but you also have to make sure that you're not taking unnecessary risks, like crazy amounts of credit card debt, additional student loans that you have no ability to pay back, or no real plan, right? So he talks a lot about the housing market in this article, which we'll share with you. But I think somebody jumped on and said, it would be really helpful if you guys posted these articles on the whatever platform, if you're watching on Spotify or YouTube or Facebook or whatever. And so we're gonna start supplying that to you. So you'll get to see what we're talking about. But the three biggest items on here is that you do not, or the biggest items on here is you do not need to be crazy in touch with the housing market. You don't need to know everything about the housing market if you've never owned a home before. You are going to be better off owning than renting, period. However, if you are not ready, meaning if you don't have the assets, you don't have the income, or you have a crazy amount of debt, you need to get that taken care of first.
Yeah.
Now, here's the good news. Is most lenders, if Justin was here, he'd be the first one to tell you.
Where is Justin?
I
see his seat. He's
not
not here.
Playing with his horses or something.
Playing with his horses.
He goes to say that you need to have your debt in control. You need to have your income in control. But Justin would say, look, we're not even going to approve you if you don't have those things under control. So a lot of those things are already taken into account and put in place. And so I thought that was a really good takeaway out of this article.
So, my takeaway, you get down to the article, and the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because Dave Ramsey is saying some of the stuff that we have been saying week in and week out and week in and week out. And I know we have a lot of our listeners that have been texting into the show, and right now, if you want to learn how to buy a house, take advantage of the market, more importantly, start the process in building wealth in real estate, we want to encourage you to text the word wealth to 623-AZ-RECON. That's wealth to 623-AZ-RECON. So the first one, and I think most Americans understand this, but he is predicting between now and at the end of the year, interest rates will decrease. And since October of, the 30-year mortgage has fallen from 8% to 6.3% since last October already. What does that mean to you, Ryan? I mean, I think we can all safely say there's no guarantees. That's the other thing in the market. There's no guarantees. I can't 100% guarantee anything.
Right.
But I think that we are pretty darn confident that that rates will drop. The big date is going to be tomorrow, September 17th, because that's the next time that the Feds are going to meet.
So I think that if we're just looking at it super linear, then it's like, okay, that's great as far as home purchasing goes, but it affects everything in your world. Commercial rates went up, right? So that means that wherever you shop, wherever you eat, wherever you do whatever, their overhead went up. Therefore, their price increases landed on your lap as well.
And the supply chain, every place that they get anything from, that their costs have gone up.
Anything that you consume from, their costs went up. Therefore, their prices went up. So your cost of living went up. And whatever it is that you do in any lifestyle that you have, right? So it's not just that, oh, hey, it's more affordable to own a home. Now you can go get groceries a little bit cheaper. You can get gas a little bit cheaper. You can do whatever it is to run your business a little bit cheaper, right? And so when I see a 8% to 6.3, the numbers are, you have to look at a number of different things, but you're usually increasing your purchase power by about 10% every single time it drops a full point. So that's a lot.
That's a heck of a lot.
Right. So if you're buying at 500, now you're at 550. Just because it went from 8 to 7, and then another 10% when you jump from 7 to 6. So you kind of get the idea.
Yeah, and I know that we're a day ahead. Like the Feds are going to meet tomorrow, and there's been a lot of chatter, a lot of talk that September was going to be a big month, whether it's politically driven.
For sure it
It
is.
doesn't matter. It's that, it's you are a home buyer or you're an investor, and you just need to understand. The second thing, and this is the thing that we've been preaching and preaching and preaching, there are so many people that we talk with on a daily basis hesitant to get into the game because they're under the impression that they're truly believing that there is going to be a crash in the housing market. And they're going to wait for the crash in the housing market. And according to this article, and according to Dave Ramsey, his prediction is that a crash in the housing market is not imminent.
I think that we've talked about we've beat this dead horse into the ground 15 times over. But I think that the hard part is that we just experienced quite a significant drop in the market. And so the question is when is it going to stop, right? And what we've been seeing is that we're right there at the leveled off part of the bottom of the trough, if you will, because just like you can picture a stock curve, it just goes up and down, right? And so it has its peaks and valleys. And all of our data suggests that the worst is behind us. And yeah, we're probably going to have another year, maybe 18 months, where we're not going to see a whole lot of value movement. So your home that's worth $1 million is probably going to stay worth about $1 million here for the next year to 18 months. So if you're making a move, it's going to be pretty much a lateral move unless you want to dig a little bit deeper into those pockets, right? So just kind of keeping everything relative. Instead of saying, hey, look, I'm going to come over here and play the market, or I don't feel like it's the right time, or I feel like I'm making a bad move. If you were to talk to us a year ago, we would have said back then, hey, look, if you're planning on moving into this place for 6 months or a year, it's probably not a wise move because interest rates are high and we are seeing higher inflation and numbers just aren't looking good. But we knew that we were going to be experiencing the bottom of this trough here, probably for the next couple of years. And so now fast forward a year, we probably have about another year left.
All right, if you'd like the opportunity to speak to a real estate wealth manager and have a discussion about this and put yourself on that path to building wealth in real estate, we want to encourage you to text the word wealth to 623-AZ-RECON. That's wealth to 623-AZ-RECON. I want to now touch on Dave Ramsey's third prediction, and because I think this is the one that makes me pause and warn people on how you read it. And so his third prediction is housing inventory is likely to stay low through December. I think the confusion for me in this, and where you have to be careful, yes, housing inventory is likely to stay low, but low from what? Right? Because we have seen here in Maricopa County over the last 4 weeks, inventory go up approximately 10%. I think until interest rates drop significantly, I think inventory is going to continue to go up, but it's still low.
The operative words there, though, are Maricopa County.
Right.
And here we're talking about on a national level. And
But I'm also talking about then what opportunities present themselves. And here in Maricopa County, in which prism do we see this through?
Right, and it's also relative to what demand is. So supply is low, but demand has stayed relatively low because, well, people don't want to sell their 3% interest rate to go buy a 7%. And then there's people who simply can't enter the market because the interest rates are at 7%, or they lost their job, or the cost of living is high, and they just kind of entered at a weird time. But those times don't last. There's always going to be just windows where things like this happen. Now, the only thing that I don't ever foresee really ever reoccurring is like what happened during COVID, where interest rates were in the 2s, and then and particularly in Maricopa County, you could still buy a home even in the low 200s, or definitely sub 3, buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath sub 300 with a 2% interest rate. We're never going to see something like that again. I think that there's going to be, for the most part, if you're new to the market, you're probably going to need to have a 2-income household.
Well, and if you're a waiter and you're a person that's just waiting to jump in the game, there's a good chance you're always a waiter, right? There's probably for some people, because I was talking to Justin about this last week. He goes, we're having these conversations right now with people. Interest rates were in the eights, and they're saying, hey, I need them to get down to the sevens, and then they get into the sevens, and even to get down to the sixes. He goes, Mike, these are the same people a couple of years ago when interest rates were in the mid twos. They were waiting because they were waiting for interest rates to get into the ones. And if they get into the ones, they're waiting for interest rates to become zero.
They're waiting to get paid.
And so I think for a lot of people, that interest rate is a crutch and an excuse. And then going back to, what you can afford. Obviously, if you can't afford to buy a home and you can't afford to make the mortgage payments, you should not buy a home. I would never advise you to buy a home. But there's also a lot of people going, well, I want to wait because I want to wait for interest rates to get dropped because, yes, today I can qualify for a $400,000 house, but my perfect home, there's no perfect home for me out there at $400,000. I need for interest rates to drop because my perfect home, the home that I really want to live in, is about $450,000.
Yeah.
Now, when rates get into, and this is the danger, so when rates get into, let's say, the mid to high fives, that $450,000 home is no longer costing $450,000. So what's the mindset of, hey, listen, let's remove as much of emotion from the equation. You're never going to live in this home forever. Very few people right now are going to buy a home that they're going to be in it forever. Let's find something that's going to help you put you on that trajectory to building wealth in real estate.
And I also think that people have commitment issues. They think that the fact that they own it is like, okay, well, I could potentially be stuck with this home or this mortgage for forever. And while it's not as liquid as, say, a month-to-month lease, definitely is not that, but it is a liquid asset. There's really not been a market for a while where it didn't take any more than 90 days to liquidate a home, depending on where you are, et cetera. But it's just been one of those things where it's really easy to move through these things. Now, the only other thing to really consider is the money element of it, and that's where I think people get in trouble. Is I think that they're afraid of being sold, and that in turn turns them into a person having commitment issues. So they walk into a home, all they can afford is $500. They walk into a home that's $600. They're going to beg, borrow, and steal in order to become house poor. Because what Ramsey talks about in here as well is one of the things to watch out for is to making sure that you're not spending more than 25% of your monthly income. Now he's talking about net, right? Well, when you get pre-approved, you get pre-approved on gross income. So they'll let you go up to 40, 45, sometimes even 50% debt to income before they say, all right, we're not going to lend you anymore. What Ramsey is saying, whatever your take home is, if you're taking home $10,000 a month, then you cannot spend more than $2,500 a month on your mortgage. Mm-hmm. And to also, he wants you to have a 20% down payment. I like that if you're a third or fourth time home buyer, but I think you need to have a little bit more risk when you're a first or second time home buyer.
Yeah.
I know you got a thought on that.
I do, because I don't, ideally, if you've got 20% and you can do it, fine. But if you can afford to put 5% down and get into your first house and buy an appreciating asset, I would say do it, because by the time you go from having 5% in savings to 20% in savings, those houses have gone up dramatically. And that 20% today, that number keeps growing. You keep chasing that number.
20% today could be 5% in 10 years. So you have to keep on growing. So that's a great point. Another thing that he points out in here is you are able to pay closing costs without taking them out of your down payment and being debt-free. Now, I look at those things and I say, well, what if you have a student loan? If you pay that off, you have zero trade lines. If you have 0 trade lines, you don't get approved. If you don't get approved, then it doesn't matter whether or not you're ready, willing, and able to jump into the market anyhow. You have to have some debt. So I think that there's just a little bit of oversight on this, and then having an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months worth of costs. Now I don't buy anything unless I have a minimum of 6. But when I first jumped into the real estate market, I had like 1, maybe 2. So just understanding where you need to be risk adverse and having a plan and just saying, hey, look, not all this is going to work for everybody. It's a growing thing. And when you're 65 and you're buying that retirement home, then you probably should have 2 or 3 years worth of reserves ready to go, because you don't know if health is going to hit or if, your job isn't going to be there or whatever, and being able to have that runway.
All righty. Well, I guess I should clarify. I'm not going to even encourage or tell our listeners to text to jump in the game. We're not even talking about jumping in the game right now. We're encouraging you to text to have a conversation with us. Let's strategize. Let's find that best timing for you and that best route for you. And that starts by you texting the word wealth to 623-AZ-RECON. That's wealth to 623-AZ-RECON.